The BPDU filter feature is now part of CCNA, and it's a very dangerous feature. So before you ever configure a command with BPDU filter in it, make sure you are fully confident of what it will do, and this video will help you understand it. Let's jump into it. For most of my videos, I follow the outline of the books, but in this case, I've got a little bit of BPDU filtering in Chapter 9 and a little bit in Chapter 10 in the current CCNA Official Cert Guide, 2nd edition that you see the cover of over on the left. So what's the deal? Well, I've got the concepts in Chapter 9 and the implementation, the config and verification in Chapter 10. But for the purposes of these videos in this YouTube channel, I decided, hey, let's put them all together in one video. So here's the deal. In this video, I'll talk about the two different features that Cisco calls BPDU filter or BPDU filtering. And they use that one name, but honestly, they act like two different features. Conditional BPDU filtering is something that's only used with PortFast, and it's not dangerous. That is, if you do it wrong, it doesn't break anything. And then unconditional BPDU filtering is the one for which you really can make your network unusable by configuring it the wrong way. So those are the two topics. If you stick around to the end, I'll give you advice about where to study from here. As always, as if you're in my CCNA study group, I'll point you to things here at the Network Upskill channel, as well as things that you'll find in those official cert guides. All right, let's jump in. So there are two flavors of this BPDU filtering. So conditional filtering described on the right, it works only with PortFast. So its only meaning as life is for ports that are already doing PortFast. And notice it says here at the bottom, it says configured with the global command. So if you see the keyword BPDU filter and it's in a global command, that's your clue that it's conditional BPDU filtering. Now look on the left, that's the unconditional BPDU filtering, and look at the bottom of the graphic down here. Configured with a subcommand. So if you're looking at a command that's a subcommand under an interface and it's got BPDU filter in it, that's danger, danger, danger. That's the one that could possibly melt down your spanning tree and cause forwarding loops that don't go away and really make your network unusable. All right. By the way, unconditional BPDU filtering is completely unrelated to PortFast as well. And that's the second half of the video. But conditional works only with PortFast, configured via a global command. And notice it says conditional. What's the conditions? Well, it watches to see are any BPDUs arriving on this port. Now remember, PortFast, which it's working with here, is a port for which we don't expect. The switch does not expect to be receiving any BPDUs on a port. So BPDU filtering is watching out to see if that's true or not. And if it's receiving any of those unexpected BPDUs, it'll take an action. So we'll spend the next few minutes talking about that. So to set the stage, think about what PortFast does alone with no other features enabled, not BPDU filtering, not BPDU guard, just by itself. So we've got these two ports. We've enabled PortFast on each. So part of the normal process is to select those ports to be a designated port because those PCs aren't even participating in spanning tree. With PortFast enabled, those ports are immediately placed in a forwarding state. But also, spanning tree says send these hello messages as represented by those flashing arrow lines. In fact, with PortFast alone enabled and none of the protections, it'll keep sending hellos every hello timer, which defaults to every 2 seconds forever and ever. And that's important to our discussion of BPDU filtering. So with words over here on the left, just to summarize, once the port's chosen as a designated port, it's immediately forwarding. It listens for incoming BPDUs. PortFast alone listens for those, all right? We still haven't added BPDU filtering yet. And it sends out these hellos every hello time. So here's the deal. BPDU filtering turns that off, all right? By the way, it's watching or listening for those incoming BPDUs, and PortFast alone, it'll disable itself if it receives an incoming BPDU and revert back to normal spanning tree rules to converge. And it's that time lag between disabling itself and spanning tree convergence where there might be a temporary forwarding loop. Again, PortFast alone. But we might want additional protections, and BPDU guard is the most typical additional protection. But BPDU filter is another protection, and in particular, it's a protection that gets rid of these repetitive hellos. So let's take a look. So if we add to a port-fast port this conditional BPDU filtering feature, we've got these port-fast ports. They also have BPDU filter enabled. So we get these repetitive hellos, but only for a few seconds. And once those are done, the conditional BPDU filter feature says, hey, I'm not receiving any incoming BPDUs. That's the condition. So I'm listening for them. I'm not receiving any from these PCs. So I'm going to stop sending any out here. So for the next 3, 6, 9 months, whatever, as long as those links are up, there are no hellos being sent out here. Now, why would you do that? Maybe the device is connected out here. Maybe they are irritated. Maybe they have software issues. Maybe they don't want to receive those hellos. We've seen problems with them. So we turn that off by adding this conditional BPDU filter feature, and that's the origin of the feature in the first place. So just to see it in slides, when you combine port-fast with conditional BPDU filtering, as usual, the port's chosen as designated. It gets into forwarding state. It monitors for incoming BPDUs that we don't expect to get, but per the conditional BPDU filtering, hellos are sent for only 10 iterations of hello time, and if no incoming BPDUs are received during that time, the switch stops sending hellos on that port. Then it'll keep monitoring for incoming hellos, and if it receives some, it'll disable port-fast, but start sending BPDUs again, so that the normal STP logic can converge and block where it needs to prevent any forwarding loops. So let's look at the config, and keep in mind, this is the one that's not dangerous, so it's okay to configure this one, all right? So here's the deal. This is a global command, notice the prompt, spanning tree, port-fast, implying it's tied to port-fast, BPDU filter default, saying that on any port-fast enabled ports, now our default is to use BPDU filter. That's the meaning of this command. Now, if you stopped there, any ports running port-fast, now use BPDU filter like we just described. Easy enough. Now, let's just say you had a switch with 24 access ports and you wanted to use port-fast on those, but you didn't want to use BPDU filter on port 24. You could get into interface config mode on port 24 and use this command, spanning tree, BPDU filter, disable, an interface subcommand, and it's got this disable keyword, which basically says override the global setting and disable the BPDU filter feature on just that interface. All right, so that's a way to turn it off in one place, and these words down here summarize what I just told you for reference. Then with show commands to verify things, let's just say you've got some port-fast ports and they're up and working and endpoints are attached, not switches. So things are working normally. There are no incoming BPDUs, all right? So it's working as designed. So the show spanning tree interface command is going to show the port as a designated port in a forwarding state. And using RSTP terminology, it's going to show the type as PTP edge or point-to-point edge with emphasis on the word edge. All right. Now that would be true on any port-fast port when there's an endpoint connected. All right. Then in the show spanning tree interface command with the detail keyword, where we get more information, if we scroll down and look for the first line that mentions port-fast, we're going to have this line that says the port is in the port-fast mode. And a few lines after that, because BPDU filter is enabled, it's going to say BPDU filter is enabled. And it turns out, bit of trivia, it says by default, that's kind of code to mean because of that global command we just configured. So everything's up and working. That's the pattern you'd want to look for to see in the output of these show commands when it's working as normal. But of course, we're there to protect against that day when a switch gets connected and BPDUs are sent in to this switch and it's going to react, right? So what do these commands look like when that happens? So if it's receiving inbound PDUs unexpectedly, here's what changes. Down here, that line that mentions BPDU filter, it disappears from the output. So if you didn't know it was supposed to be there, you wouldn't realize it. It's just gone. That line up here, though, about port-fast mode, it stays there and it's unchanged. And then finally up here in the command without the detail keyword, it still says PTP, but it doesn't have that keyword edge. Why is that? PTP by itself means it's not using port fast. PTP Edge says it is using port fast. And remember how when a BPDU arrives, BPDU filter turns off port fast? Well, that's an indication that indeed port fast is turned off. Now comes the dangerous one, all right? So on the left, as a reminder, this one's unrelated to port fast, and it's configured with an interface subcommand. So that's where you want to be paying attention to avoid the command unless you are absolutely sure you understand the topology and the risks, all right? So it's called unconditional because there are no conditions it's looking for. It always does the same thing, all right? It's not reacting to different conditions in the network. So what does it do? It turns off spanning tree on the port. You do the interface subcommand, no more spanning tree. So what do I mean by that? It doesn't send BPDUs. It doesn't process any received BPDUs. It doesn't apply spanning tree logic. It doesn't have any spanning tree state. It can't block the port. Let me say that again. It can't block the port. All right, so where would you want to use this? Well, first of all, let's show you where you don't want to use this so you don't go off and configure it and break your network, all right? So here's your good old network with distribution switches up here and access switches down here. So up there on those links that are probably trunks between switches, don't use unconditional BPDU filtering there because we want spanning tree there. And down there on those ports connected to endpoints, don't turn on unconditional BPDU filtering there. We want spanning tree on those ports too. We want spanning tree. We might also want port fast and one of the protection mechanisms, but we still want spanning tree enabled. Leave it enabled. Yeah. So if you've got your LAN, and I just told you, don't use this feature, where in the world do you use it? Well, it's most often used between two organizations. So here we go, Organization 1 and Organization 2. And if you're going to connect your layer 2 networks, like these two LANs, with a cable like this, and it's going to be one connection, one cable, then you might say, hey, we're using spanning tree over here, we're using spanning tree over here, but there's not redundancy between the two, and we just want one link so we can forward some frames between each other. You might then decide to not use spanning tree in here and use unconditional BPDU filtering, aka turn off spanning tree on both switches on the opposite ends of that link. And that's what this feature does. All right. Now you might look at it and say, well, I don't think I'd ever connect two companies together like that. Well, it might be, for instance, an Ethernet WAN service provider who's providing a layer 2 service between your company and WAN, and same kind of deal applies. Two different organizations. Maybe you don't need spanning tree on that link, and that's where it would be reasonable to use, but probably never inside just your company's LAN. All right. The danger, though, when you use it is somebody gets clever and says, hey, this link, that was good, so let me add another one like this other one I added between D1 and SW2. And now I've got redundant paths between Organization 1 and Organization 2. And if we've used unconditional BPDU filtering, aka we've turned off spanning tree on both of those links, we've created a forwarding loop between the two companies. So instead of just melting down one network, we've melted down two to where they're unusable. That would be bad, obviously. So that's why I say, use this feature sparingly, only when you're confident of it. Make sure you understand it. If you have any doubts whatsoever, don't use the command. Have a meeting, talk about it, get consensus before you do something that could be career changing. So to sum up the logic, it disables spanning tree on the port. We don't send hellos out the port. We discard any received hellos. There's no role or state for spanning tree. It's just off. There's no other logic to apply there, and it's enabled by that interface subcommand. So what's that subcommand look like? You get into interface config mode, spanning tree, BPDU filter, enable, and now you've enabled this unconditional BPDU filter, aka you've disabled spanning tree on the interface. This show command mentions that BPDU filter is enabled, as you see there. So study group, if you are using the books, by the way, the content in this video matches up to two different chapters, a couple of different sections. Just look for the topics on BPDU filter. And the number one takeaway, of course, is avoiding enabling unconditional BPDU filtering with that interface subcommand, because it truly can cause big time problems in your network. So just make extra sure you're comfortable with your topology before you ever attempt that command in production. Then if you want to practice the concepts for CCNA, I've got an interview review video for you all ready to go. You could give it a few days and then try it, or do it right now, but here's the topology we'll use in that. And for the interview, I set you up with two cases. One is port fast alone over here on switch A1, and then port fast with conditional BPDU filtering over on A2, and ask you a series of questions to compare and contrast those. With the books, it's pretty straightforward. You could go find the matching sections in those two chapters and use those just as a second source, but that's pretty standard. Hey, thanks for hanging until the end. If you're ready for the next learning topic, click on the left. You'll get to a video about root guard, which is yet another spanning tree protocol topic. If you're ready to review conditional BPDU filtering, click on the right and you'll get to that interview review video. Hey, thanks for hanging out. I'll talk to you soon.